God often calls to the region beyond our blank. Grace and peace, everybody. Welcome to Sabbath School Study Group. This is part 5, last part of this 5-part series on our mission to the unreached. Before we get into our study for the day, I want to thank you for watching. Hopefully you watched all the series. If you've been blessed, please share this with someone else. Subscribe to the channel so we can stay in touch and click the like button below. That is what helps the video be seen by others, and we're able to share it that much more. God often calls to the region beyond our blank. That blank, leave it there. The region of what we call familiar, or the region of what we call comfort. That comfort or familiarity region, it can be yay big, it can be this big, it can be that narrow, but it's somewhere, right? Well, that space, what we call our personal space, even in a literal sense, God can call us beyond that. Because in order to get into someone else's space, someone else's bubble, we got to get out of our own. Here in the story of Acts chapter 10, it's the encounter now that Peter is having to get called out of his comfort zone, that region beyond his blank. And it says there in Acts chapter 10 in verse 11, in the midst of the story, Peter sees heaven open, a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners, and let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. So he's in this vision now, and he sees these animals, all kinds of creatures. It's like a zoo in a tent. It's like a zoo in a basket. Okay, he's seeing everything from little tiny creepy stuff to big stuff. And he hears a voice telling him to eat it. Dinner time. Go get it. Lunchtime. And so now look at Peter's response to the command. It says, Peter said, "Not so, Lord." Oh, wait a minute. So he knows this is the Lord talking. And he says, "I've never eaten anything that is common or unclean." And the voice spake again unto him again the second time. "What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common." Same voice. And we know he's not just hearing things. We know it's not John or some other disciple, because he says, "No, Lord." He knows it's God speaking to him, and he testifies to his history, his region. What I've never gone outside of this bound. And he gives the reason why, because that's there, it's unclean. This was not a food vision. God was not trying to ask Peter to change his diet. He was trying to call him to change his outlook, to allow his outlook to be changed, to recognize that whatever God has called special is special. Don't call what God sanctifies or what God has cleansed common. He didn't change the rules on roaches and pigs and unclean animals. He's trying to say, Peter, what or who you're calling a roach is actually righteous through Christ. And what you or who you might call a pig, that's actually a person. Don't call what God has called cleansed common. And that's why we can't call what is common cleansed. So as Peter is hearing this, and as we're looking at this, we have to be mindful that we've got to let God draw the bounds to the game that he's called us to play in. We can't create those lines, because more often than not, we'll cut them too close for our benefit, or we'll cut them too far for our benefit. We're coming from a bad place. So why not leave it to God to say, Lord, if you're showing me what you're trying to show Peter, and that is that you want us to reach the unreached, it doesn't mean that I accept who and what they have become, but actually it's saying to me that because of who and what they've become, it's going to drive me, it's going to draw me to want to bring them out of that. I'm not going to cut them off, but I'm actually going to call them up because of their situation. And that's why even when Peter gives his testimony, he was doubting in himself. God knows that that's a struggle. He knows this is not something that's convenient. So Peter has the same struggle, right? When Peter was doubting in himself what this vision and what he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius here in verse 17 and 18 made inquiry for Simon's house and stood before the gate and called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, were lodged there. While he was struggling, God was striding to him. I'm so glad that even when I can be in a state of confusion, God is still calling. And here he's calling to Peter because he knows that this is now in his mind. So he's given it time and he's given it reason for it to sink into his heart. And that's to recognize that God is calling me beyond my region of comfort. He's calling me beyond my region of familiarity, which means he can call you beyond your culture, which means he can call you beyond your church, which means he can call you further than your family and say, I need you in this space to fill in the blank. Get beyond your blank to fill in my blank. With this kind of attitude, Peter now is able to not just be this apostle or minister to who we would call Israel, but now he becomes an example and an apostle and a minister to what we used to call a Gentile. Instead, we just call them God's child. To go from Gentile to God's child is what all of us have been able to do now because of God's son, Jesus Christ. God is so good. It's good to know that because of that, this whole family reunion can take place. But we before we can get to the reunion, we got to pay our dues. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. When you have family reunion, you got to collect money so you can get all your stuff together so that when you come together, you got food and you've got stuff to play with because everybody paid their dues. If we're going to see heaven filled with people beyond our blank, we have to be willing now to pay the dues of being willing to go beyond our blank. I encourage you, don't fight it. Accept it. Don't doubt it. If God has convicted you, do it. And when you do that, as we have done in our lives, it's amazing to see how you can see the beauty of God in all kinds of places, from all kinds of faces, and in all kinds of spaces.